The whole room smelled like my mother's Sunday roast. And lies. It's a strange thing, how you can get used to that second smell. You live with it long enough, you start to think it's just the normal scent of home. My brother, Mark, was holding court, of course. He'd received some minor award from the local business association, a paper certificate in a cheap frame probably, and you'd have thought he'd just been crowned king. My mother was beaming, just radiating pride for her son, the CEO. And my father, he was doing his usual thing, nodding along, sipping his water, a silent, steady presence that I used to mistake for strength. They were talking about Mark's new contract, his vision, his brand. I just waited for a gap in the performance. When it came, I mentioned it. Quietly. I said the local high school had asked me to speak at their Veterans Day event. Mark laughed. It wasn't a big, booming laugh. It was short, sharp, a little pop of sound designed to puncture the moment. "What are you going to talk about?" he said, a smirk pulling at his lips. "How to perfectly fold a t-shirt." Some of us build things in the real world, Sarah, and the room just stopped. The air went solid. The only sound was my father, suddenly coughing, a wet, hacking sound. He was choking on his water, his face turning a blotchy red as he refused to look at me, at anyone. He just stared down at his plate like it held all the answers. That's when it clicked. A past event wasn't just a sad memory anymore, it was evidence submitted for review. My military graduation. Mark hadn't shown up. He'd claimed he had a critical business meeting. And my mother's immediate defense of him. "You know how important his work is, honey." It wasn't an excuse. It was an alibi. A data point in a pattern I'd been too loyal to recognize. The familiar heat of humiliation started to rise in my chest. But then something else took its place. An Arctic cold. It quenched the fire instantly. All the years of being the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything, the one who just handled it, it all snapped into a single sharp point of clarity. Have you ever had that one moment? That single instant where the entire unspoken dynamic of your family just becomes crystal clear, like a lens snapping into focus? Tell me about that moment in the comments, because I was having mine right then. My mother just waved her hand, a little flutter of dismissal. "Oh, Mark," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Don't tease your sister. She's sensitive." And I looked at them, really looked at them. Mark's smug satisfaction. My mother's calculated peacekeeping. My father's willful blindness, still coughing to fill the silence. And the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. This isn't a family. This is an audience. It was a stunning realization. It wasn't just that they tolerated the disrespect. They were participants. They were all active members of a conspiracy to protect the fragile ego of the golden child. And the cost of that conspiracy was my erasure, my father's choking. That wasn't just an awkward reaction to a tense moment. It was the physical manifestation of his complicity, the silent chairman, choking on the lies he helped serve. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loud. It was buzzing with the frequency of everything that wasn't said at that dinner table. So I did what any good investigator does when the crime scene has been contaminated. I went to the archives. I opened my laptop. The shock from dinner was gone. In its place was a cold forensic resolve. My mother's social media page was my first stop. It was a digital shrine to my brother Mark. I started scrolling back. Months? Then years. It was all there. A meticulously curated timeline of his alleged greatness. So proud of my son Mark for landing the Henderson contract. Post after post. Mark's new office is just stunning. A dozen pictures of glass and steel he didn't pay for. I kept scrolling, my thumb getting numb. I was looking for a void, and I found it. I knew the exact week I was awarded the Army Commendation Medal. I'd called home, so proud. I found that week on her timeline. There was no mention of me, no mention of my service. Instead, a blurry photo of a rose from her garden. The caption read, "Enjoying the little things, the little things." While her daughter was serving her country, my mother was enjoying the little things. And it wasn't just a one-off. That memory of the phone call from my deployment. It wasn't a sad memory anymore, it was a data point. I'd been talking about a sandstorm, about how close a mortar had landed, and she'd listened for maybe 2 minutes. Then she interrupted me. She was worried about a minor plumbing issue at Mark's new condo, and wanted to know if I could use my military discount to get him a deal on a new water heater, my undiscount. For him, while I was in a war zone. Has anyone else noticed their accomplishments get ignored while a sibling gets all the praise? How did you deal with that digital silent treatment? Because this was a masterclass in it. The final piece of evidence for this part of the investigation came from the family's shared photo cloud. There were 2 main albums. One was titled Mark's Success. It had hundreds of photos. The other was titled Family Holidays. My folder. I clicked on it. There was a photo of me from Christmas, standing by the tree. I was in my dress uniform, but I barely recognized it. It had been cropped. They'd carefully framed it so that only my face was visible. My shoulders, my rank, my ribbons. All of it. Surgically removed. Gone. I felt less like a daughter, and more like a redacted line in a classified document. The truth was cold and sharp. They didn't forget. They deleted me. A pretty story needs funding. Mark's narrative of being a self-made genius. It suddenly felt very, very thin. That cold resolve in my gut told me to pull on the thread. On a hunch, I started with the Public Business Registry. I searched for his company, Mark Sterling Marketing, and there it was, official, registered, with an incorporation date from 6 years ago. I noted the date. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I navigated to my father's email. I still had the password. Years ago, I was the one who set up his computer, his accounts, his security questions. That was always my job, the responsible one, the family IT support. My hands were steady. The emotional pain was just a background hum now. The foreground was the hunt. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I was looking for facts. I typed Mark's company name into the search bar of my father's inbox, and a single email appeared. It was from my father to his financial advisor. The date on it was from the exact same week Mark's company was incorporated. The subject line was 2 words, investment transfer. That's when another piece of evidence clicked into place. I remembered right after I'd left the service, I asked my father for a small loan, $2,000, just to cover the security deposit on a small apartment. He'd given me a lecture. He told me it was important that I learn to stand on my own 2 feet. He said it with a straight face. $2,000 was a lesson in self-reliance for me. So what then was this? What did he call this? Let me ask you. What's the biggest financial secret you've ever uncovered in your family? I want to know, because I was about to find mine. Attached to the email was a scanned document, a digital receipt. It was a wire transfer confirmation from my father's personal investment account, directly to a new corporate account for Mark Sterling Marketing. The amount was for $250,000, the entire seed money. Every penny. All his boasts, all the articles in the local paper, all my mother's proud posts. All of it was a lie, a $250,000 lie. He didn't build a business. He had cashed a check. So the conspiracy was clear. The CGO, my mother, handled the narrative. The silent chairman, my father, handled the financing. And the Golden Child CEO just soaked it all up. The whole family was in on it. Or so I thought. There was one variable I hadn't accounted for. Mark's son. My nephew, David. He was a pilot in the Air Force, a fact Mark rarely brought up, I now realized, because it pulled focus from him. I found David's social media profile. It was professional, clean, filled with jets and fellow airmen. I started to scroll, not expecting much, and then I froze. There was a post from 6 months ago. It was an old photo of me, much younger, in my dress uniform. I was holding a tiny baby David at a family barbecue. I remembered that day. And I remembered what happened then too. A 10-year-old David had been peppering me with questions. "Do you fly jets, Aunt Sarah? Do you have a cool helmet?" And Mark had stepped in, pulling him away. "Don't bother your aunt, David," he'd said. "It's not as exciting as you think." He was controlling the narrative even then, trying to redact me from his own son's memory. But it hadn't worked. David's caption on the photo hit me like a ton of bricks. It read, "Throwback to the woman who taught me what service means before I even knew the word." My inspiration. #Aunt Sarah, #military family. A crack appeared in that icy resolve, and for the first time in hours, a little warmth came through. It was a shocking piece of data. It didn't fit the pattern. He saw me. He'd always seen me. Have you ever found an unexpected ally in a family member you thought was distant? I want to hear that story. Because David's post was more than just nice. It was external validation from inside the conspiracy. It was irrefutable proof that my service was noticed, that it was admired. It directly contradicted the entire narrative of insignificance my family had spent 2 decades building around me. He wasn't just a nephew. He was a potential witness. The conspiracy isn't total. There's a witness. He was a witness. And now, I knew exactly what to look for. His validation sharpened my focus. If Mark's success was a lie, I needed to prove it with something more than just a wire transfer. I needed third-party verification. I started digging into Mark Sterling marketing again, but this time, I moved past the glossy homepage he'd paid for with my father's money. I started searching for news articles, press releases, and then employee reviews. The first crack in the dam. I found a string of them on a workplace review site. They were scathing. Anonymous former employees all described the same things: a toxic work environment, missed payroll, and leadership disconnected from reality. Then I remembered a specific conversation, the Thanksgiving from the year before. Mark had cornered me by the fireplace and delivered a lecture on my lack of ambition. He told me I needed to think bigger than a stable government job. This lecture, I now realized after a quick search of a local business journal, was delivered the very same month that the journal had reported his company was hemorrhaging money after losing its biggest client. That moment when you find the one piece of information that blows a lie wide open. It is so incredibly powerful. What was your smoking gun discovery? I was close to finding mine. I kept digging. And then I hit the jackpot. It wasn't hidden in some secret file. It was a public document, available to anyone who knew how to look for it. A publicly available lawsuit filing. A major vendor, one of the biggest printing companies in the state, was suing Mark's company for $75,000 in unpaid invoices. It was all there. Dates, amounts, attempts to collect. It was irrefutable. Clinical. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about fraud. A fraud of character, of success, of identity. Mark wasn't a CEO. He was a cosplayer. A man playing dress-up in a suit bought with our father's money, in an office he couldn't pay for a company that was drowning in debt. A grim satisfaction settled over me. It was done. The case was solid. The empire is hollow. The investigation phase was over. All the data points had been collected: the digital erasure, the financial fraud, the crumbling business empire, the single unexpected witness. I had the facts. Now I had to build the case. I sat at my kitchen table with everything I'd found. The information felt heavy, tangible. In my mind, I saw them all laid out like exhibits in a courtroom. Exhibit A, the wire transfer confirmation for $250,000. Exhibit B, the digital record of my own accomplishments being systematically deleted while my brothers were inflated. Exhibit C, the business journal article detailing his gross mismanagement. Exhibit D, the lawsuit for $75,000 in unpaid bills. Exhibit E, the unsolicited, validating post from my nephew, David, the lone piece of counter-evidence to the family's entire narrative. There was no rage, no sadness. Those emotions are useless in a prosecution. They contaminate the evidence. What I felt instead was a profound, chilling clarity. The mission objective was now crystal clear. I wasn't going to try and win an argument. You can't win an argument with people who don't operate in reality. No, I was going to present a case. An undeniable case. I would force a confrontation, but it would be on my terms, in my time, armed with nothing but facts. That's when a specific memory came into focus, not as a feeling but as a procedural template. I remembered planning a complex logistical operation in the field, coordinating troops, supplies, transport, and timing under extreme pressure. There was no room for emotion in that process. It was a cold, methodical execution of a plan, based on the best available intelligence. The skills they ignored, my discipline, my strategic thinking, my ability to remain calm under fire, were the very skills I would now use to hold them accountable. I opened a new document on my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank page. I typed a title, Operation, Verdict. Then I created a personnel file. Mark, the target. Mother accomplice and chief gaslighting officer. Father, the financier and silent enabler. And David, the witness. I started to outline a sequence of events, a script for the confrontation itself. It had to be clinical. It had to be clean. It had to be a presentation of facts so overwhelming that their usual defenses, denial, gaslighting, feigned ignorance, would be useless. The forensic accountant inside me was now a prosecutor, drafting her opening statement. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of complete control. I wasn't a victim hoping they'd finally see my worth. I wasn't their daughter seeking validation. I was an officer of my own court, preparing to deliver a verdict on a long and elaborate fraud. When you finally decide to confront someone who has wronged you, are you a planner who gathers evidence and builds a case like this? Or do you just go with your gut and let it all out? Let me know your style in the comments. For me, the plan itself was the key. By externalizing the problem, by turning decades of emotional manipulation into a structured, evidence-based mission, I was severing the hold they had on me. I was taking their chaotic, emotionally driven narrative and subjecting it to cold, hard, military-grade logic. The act of creating this blueprint, of typing those words on the screen, it transformed me. I was no longer a participant in their family drama. I was now the director of its final scene. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to unclose the case. A case this significant requires a reliable witness. My entire strategy depended on David. I had his social media post, that was a piece of documentary evidence, but I needed to know where he stood now. I needed to confirm his allegiance. I navigated back to his profile. The photo showed a young man in a flight suit, a quiet confidence in his smile that I recognized. He had my father's eyes, but none of the weakness. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding for the first time since the investigation began. This wasn't data analysis. This was contact. This was a risk. I sent the direct message. I can still see the words I typed. David, it's Aunt Sarah. I saw your post from a while back. It meant a lot to me. I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest. The wait was excruciating. It felt longer than any mission delay I'd ever experienced. Then, the 3 little dots appeared. He was typing. The reply came in seconds. Aunt Sarah. Of course. Anything. I chose my next words very, very carefully. This was the critical question. The way the family, especially your dad, talks about my service. Have you noticed it too? Again, the 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. He was thinking, composing. And then, a paragraph came through. Not a sentence. A full paragraph. He told me it had driven him crazy for years. He confirmed everything I suspected. He said his father's mockery wasn't just casual teasing. It was rooted in a deep, burning jealousy and insecurity that he'd seen his whole life. And then he told me something that almost made me drop my phone. He said he had joined the Air Force because of me. Because of my example. What's the most validating message you've ever received? The one that made you feel completely, totally seen and erased all your self-doubt? I want you to share it below. Because I was reading mine. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees right there in my kitchen. I was not insane. I was not too sensitive. My reality, the reality I had been told for 20 years was a fiction I'd invented in my own head, was just validated by the one person in that family whose integrity I trusted implicitly. And with that validation, another piece of evidence from the past was recontextualized. I recalled a teenage David coming to me, not his father, for help with his application to the Air Force Academy. I remembered reviewing his essays. At the time, I just thought he came to me because I had the relevant experience. A simple, logical choice. I didn't see it for what it was. He wasn't just looking for an editor. He was seeking an ally. Even then. Then, he sent one more message. The final, crucial piece of evidence I needed. He told me his dad's business was in serious trouble. More trouble than the lawsuit suggested. And he said that my father, his grandfather, had just given Mark another substantial sum of money to keep it afloat. Just last month. The fraud wasn't historical, it was ongoing. The conspiracy was active. And with that final piece of intelligence, a lifetime of muffled, confusing signals became perfectly clear. The truth had an echo I couldn't hear until now. My conversation with David wasn't a conversation. It was a deposition. We got on a video call, and for the first hour, I said almost nothing. I just listened. I let the witness speak, and he did. Years of pent-up frustration, years of observations he thought he was the only one making, just came pouring out. I listened with the calm, steady focus of a detective conducting a formal interview. Every word he said was another piece of corroborating evidence. He described his father's, my brother's, constant, desperate need for admiration, the way he would inflate every minor success into a world-changing triumph, while meticulously hiding every single failure. He talked about our mother's role in the operation. He called her Mark's publicist. He said she spent her life spinning narratives, building a mythology around her son, and immediately shutting down any line of questioning from anyone, family, friends, that threatened the facade. And then he confirmed the family's official story about me, the one they told cousins and neighbors. He said that in their version of reality, I'd had a nice little adventure in the military. An adventure, like a backpacking trip through Europe. And that now, I was finding my feet. That was the term they used. Meanwhile, Mark was a visionary entrepreneur who was building an empire. David said he'd heard that exact phrase dozens of times. A visionary entrepreneur. As he spoke, something inside me shifted. My personal grievance, my hurt feelings, my anger, it all began to recede. It was being replaced by the cold, hard realization that this was bigger than me. Was a machine. A multi-generational pattern of behavior, with defined roles, rules, and objectives. Have you ever had a conversation with a family member that completely changed your understanding of your own family history? Where you suddenly saw the blueprint behind the wallpaper? Because David was handing me the blueprint, and with it, another memory, another piece of evidence, was reframed. I remembered my mother on the phone with me years ago, her voice laced with concern. "You need to be more supportive of your brother," she'd said. "His world is so high pressure." At the time, I'd felt guilty. Now, through the lens of David's testimony, I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a request for support. It was an instruction. It was an order to fall in line, to maintain the conspiracy, to do my part to prop up the failing CEO. Then, David revealed a crucial detail, a piece of new intelligence that changed the entire risk assessment. He told me that my father hadn't just given Mark the seed money. He had co-signed major financial agreements. The lease on Mark's expensive downtown office, the loan on his luxury car that he drove to that office. Both were in my father's name as much as Mark's. Both were now at risk because of the business's imminent failure. The silent chairman wasn't just a passive enabler throwing cash at a problem. He was an active CO conspirator. His own financial security was now tied directly to the lie. He wasn't just funding the operation, he was on the hook for it. This was never about me. It's a system. Armed with David's intelligence, I started a new line of inquiry. The system had standard operating procedures, and I now knew how to look for them. David, now fully committed to the investigation, said he had something for me. He felt guilty about our grandfather's exposure, but he felt that the truth was more important. He forwarded me a family update email our mother had sent out to the entire extended family just 1 month prior. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. A work of art. In it, she celebrated Mark's recent business expansion, an expansion which I now knew from the Business Journal article was actually a desperate downsizing where he'd laid off 3 employees. She framed it as a strategic move into new markets. Then, in the next paragraph, she asked the family to keep me in their prayers as I was still adjusting to civilian life. I had been honorably discharged for 3 full years. I had a good job. I had my own apartment, but in her narrative, I was still a fragile, aimless veteran, adrift in the world. I methodically saved the email. It was my Exhibit A for proving intent to manipulate. David then mentioned offhandedly that he'd overheard his parents arguing about the second loan. I immediately pieced it together with the intel he'd given me before. The initial $250,000 investment, the CO signed leases. And now this, a second, secret loan from my father to Mark, just to make payroll. The numbers were staggering. The investigation was becoming all-consuming. I felt completely detached now, like I was an auditor examining the books of a failed corporation, not my own family. Each new piece of evidence just added another layer of steel to my resolve, and it brought another memory into sharp focus. The memory of my first car, a 10-year-old sedan that cost $4,000. My father had loaned me half of it, and he had made a ledger, a handwritten ledger where he meticulously tracked every single dollar I paid back, with interest. That memory contrasted with the hundreds of thousands of dollars he had poured into Mark's black hole of a company with no apparent accountability. It was stark. It was damning. What's the most blatant lie you've ever seen someone try to spin, and how did you finally get the proof to blow it wide open? David gave me that proof. He said he had one more thing for me. He felt weird about it, but he thought I needed to see it. Months ago, he'd been in his dad's home office and had seen something so ridiculous he'd snapped a picture of it. He sent it to me. It was a photo of a whiteboard. On it, my brother had scrawled a desperate, nonsensical turnaround plan for his business. It was full of meaningless buzzwords like synergy and optimization. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was at the very bottom. A short, handwritten note, separate from the rest. It read, "Get another $100K from Dad. Use Mom to pressure him." There it was. The smoking gun of the emotional conspiracy. Not just a theory, but written proof. He was actively, consciously conspiring with the chief gaslighting officer to manipulate the silent chairman out of more money. This was an ongoing criminal enterprise. The debt is more than financial. It was time to synthesize intelligence. I created a new shared document and sent the link to David. The title was Timeline of Manipulation. It was time to put every single data point in chronological order, to see the whole war, not just the individual battles. I started with my own life. I listed every major military milestone, my enlistment date, my graduation from basic, my promotions, my deployments, my commendations, my honorable discharge. And next to each one, I created a column, family reaction. The entries were chillingly consistent: silence, deflection, or most often, a conveniently timed, manufactured crisis for Mark that took precedence over everything else. My first promotion was overshadowed by Mark needing help moving into a new apartment. My return from a year-long deployment was dominated by Mark's drama over a fender bender. Then, I started a second timeline below mine, Mark's life. And I cross-referenced his supposed milestones with the financial data I had. The pattern was undeniable. It was a perfect inverse relationship. Every time I achieved something real, something on my own, Mark received a financial or emotional bailout to recenter the family narrative squarely back on him. His first failed startup attempt coincided with my graduation. The $250,000 investment happened the same month I was accepted into a competitive leadership program. David began to add his own intel to the timeline, his own memories, now seen through a new, clearer lens. Birthdays where my service was the butt of one of Mark's jokes. Holidays where our mother would pull him aside and subtly belittle my career choices, telling him to pray for my safety in a way that framed it as a reckless, foolish decision. Looking at the completed timeline, I felt a profound sense of grim validation. My life hadn't been a series of random, unfortunate slights. It was a documented history of calculated emotional and financial attrition. The case was now airtight. If you were to lay out a timeline of your own life, your biggest successes and failures, do you think you'd see a pattern in how your family reacted? Looking at that timeline, one final piece of evidence slammed into place. I remembered my mother calling me selfish for re-enlisting for a second term. What about your family? She'd pleaded. Mark needs his sister right now. I knew at the time that Mark was in the middle of a messy breakup. I'd thought my mom was just being overly dramatic. But now, on the timeline, I saw it for what it was. It was a calculated move. She wasn't trying to get her daughter back home. She was trying to recall a valuable asset from the field, to serve as an emotional support animal for the golden child. My career was an inconvenience to his needs. The timeline was the key. It was the ultimate discovery. When viewed as a whole, it was an irrefutable, undeniable portrait of a systemic conspiracy to suppress one child for the express benefit of another. It proved intent. It proved method. It proved a consistent pattern of behavior stretching back 2 decades. It was my most powerful weapon, and it revealed the most chilling truth of all. It was never a competition. It was a containment strategy. Digital evidence is one thing. It's ephemeral, easy to dismiss. To build an airtight case, you need a physical file. You need a briefing book. So I went to a copy shop. I printed everything. Every last piece of the digital puzzle. The social media posts where my accomplishments were erased. I printed them with the dates and times clearly visible. The public business registry filings for Mark's company. The news articles detailing his financial mismanagement. The official court filing for the lawsuit against him. The wire transfer confirmation for $250,000. And the damning photograph of the whiteboard, the one David had sent me, with my brother's own handwriting plotting to manipulate our parents. I didn't just stack them in a pile. I arranged them chronologically in a simple black 3-ring binder. Each document was slid into its own clear plastic sleeve. This wasn't a scrapbook of grievances. It was a legal exhibit. I organized it with numbered tabs, each one a separate charge in the indictment. Tab 1, narrative erasure. Tab 2, financial discrepancies. Tab 3, the facade of success. Tab 4, documented manipulation. As I worked, another memory surfaced, not of a trauma, but of a process. The meticulous hours-long preparation of my military dress uniform before a formal inspection. Every ribbon measured and perfectly placed. Every crease on my uniform sharp enough to cut glass. Every piece of brass polished until it shone like gold. There is a profound calm in that level of discipline, in that attention to detail. I was applying that exact same process now. This binder was my dress uniform, and I was preparing for a final inspection, not of myself, but of my family's character. When you prepare for a big confrontation, what's your weapon of choice? Is it a carefully written script, a list of bullet points, or do you go all in and build a binder full of evidence like this? Let me know in the comments. As I was assembling the file, sliding the last piece of paper into its sleeve, I saw it. The final, chilling piece of the timeline. The key discovery. I was looking at 2 documents at once. One was a printout of the email I'd sent to my parents, telling them the exciting news that I'd been accepted into a prestigious leadership program for veterans. The other was the bank record for my father's second large cash infusion to Mark, the one David had told me about. I looked at the dates. My email was sent on a Tuesday. The transfer to Mark's account was processed on a Friday. 3 days later. It was the final, chilling proof of the containment strategy. My success didn't just coincide with his bailout. My success indirectly triggered a financial reward for his failure. They weren't just propping him up. They were actively using their resources to counterbalance my achievements, to keep the scales tipped in his favor. I clicked the 3 rings of the binder shut. The sound was so solid, so final. And I felt a profound sense of calm wash over me. The chaos of 20 years of emotion, the confusion, the hurt, the anger, had been forged into this. A single, heavy, orderly object. It was a weapon made of pure, undeniable fact. There was no anger left, only readiness. The truth is heavy. I'm going to make them hold it. The briefing book was complete. The evidence was compiled. The next phase was tactical. It was time to wargame the confrontation. I called David. This wasn't a call between an aunt and a nephew. It was a strategy session between a mission commander and her most trusted officer. It's going to happen soon, I told him, my voice steady. Your grandmother will call to invite me to dinner. She'll say she wants to clear the air. When she does, I will accept. He was quiet, listening. The plan requires precise timing, I continued. I need you to arrive exactly 15 minutes late. By then the trap will be set. Your father will have already started in on me. His mockery is the trigger. That's your signal. I gave him his instructions for his entrance. Walk in. I don't want you to say hi to anyone else first. Not your mother, not your grandfather. You walk directly to me. It needs to be formal. It needs to be a statement. Then, we started running drills. We role-played their every likely reaction. Our mother's immediate attempt to smooth things over. Her inevitable, now is not the time or place. Our father's panicked, guilty silence. And my brother's blustering, cornered rage. For each of their predictable moves, we devised a calm, fact-based response. We rehearsed our lines. We prepared our counter-offensives. The personal pain of it all was gone. It had been replaced by a sharp, tactical focus, and a specific memory of running military drills came back to me. We would simulate worst-case scenarios, ambushes, equipment failure, communication breakdown, over and over and over. We did it until the correct response was no longer a thought. It was automatic. It was muscle memory. I was doing the same thing now. Drilling my and David's responses to their emotional attacks until they were just as automatic, until there was no risk of us being pulled back into the chaos. Do you rehearse difficult conversations in your head? What's the most elaborate wargaming you've ever done before talking to someone? We were in the middle of a drill, simulating Mark's denial about the business failing, when David stopped me. He said something that became the final, crucial key to the entire operation. He gave me the tactical advantage. You know, my dad has a tell, he said. When he feels exposed, he attacks. He always does. And he only has one move. The moment he feels cornered, he'll mock you about your service. He'll make a joke about it. It's his only weapon. And there it was. The key, the thing that would allow me to control the entire engagement without ever being the aggressor. I didn't need to find a way to start the confrontation. I just needed to create the conditions for him to start it for me. I just had to wait for his one predictable attack. He would be the one to spring my trap. Predictability is a weapon, and they are very predictable. Digital evidence is one thing. It's ephemeral, easy to dismiss. To build an airtight case, you need a physical file. You need a briefing book. So I went to a copy shop. I printed everything. Every last piece of the digital puzzle. The social media posts where my accomplishments were erased. I printed them with the dates and times clearly visible. The public business registry filings for Mark's company, the news articles detailing his financial mismanagement, the official court filing for the lawsuit against him, the wire transfer confirmation for $250,000, and the damning photograph of the whiteboard, the one David had sent me, with my brother's own handwriting plotting to manipulate our parents. I didn't just stack them in a pile. I arranged them chronologically in a simple black 3-ring binder. Each document was slid into its own clear plastic sleeve. This wasn't a scrapbook of grievances. It was a legal exhibit. I organized it with numbered tabs, each one a separate charge in the indictment. Tab 1, narrative erasure. Tab 2, financial discrepancies. Tab 3, the facade of success. Tab 4, documented manipulation. As I worked, another memory surfaced, not of a trauma, but of a process. The meticulous, hours-long preparation of my military dress uniform before a formal inspection. Every ribbon measured and perfectly placed. Every crease on my uniform sharp enough to cut glass. Every piece of brass polished until it shone like gold. There is a profound calm in that level of discipline, in that attention to detail. I was applying that exact same process now. This binder was my dress uniform, and I was preparing for a final inspection, not of myself, but of my family's character. When you prepare for a big confrontation, what's your weapon of choice? Is it a carefully written script, a list of bullet points, or do you go all in and build a binder full of evidence like this? Let me know in the comments. As I was assembling the file, sliding the last piece of paper into its sleeve, I saw it. The final, chilling piece of the timeline. The key discovery. I was looking at 2 documents at once. One was a printout of the email I'd sent to my parents, telling them the exciting news that I'd been accepted into a prestigious leadership program for veterans. The other was the bank record for my father's second large cash infusion to Mark, the one David had told me about. I looked at the dates. My email was sent on a Tuesday. The transfer to Mark's account was processed on a Friday, 3 days later. It was the final chilling proof of the containment strategy. My success didn't just coincide with his bailout. My success indirectly triggered a financial reward for his failure. They weren't just propping him up. They were actively using their resources to counterbalance my achievements, to keep the scales tipped in his favor. I clicked the 3 rings of the binder shut. The sound was so solid, so final, and I felt a profound sense of calm wash over me. The chaos of 20 years of emotion, the confusion, the hurt, the anger, had been forged into this. A single, heavy, orderly object. It was a weapon made of pure, undeniable fact. There was no anger left, only readiness. The truth is heavy. I'm going to make them hold it. The briefing book was complete. The evidence was compiled. The next phase was tactical. It was time to wargame the confrontation. I called David. This wasn't a call between an aunt and a nephew. It was a strategy session between a mission commander and her most trusted officer. It's going to happen soon, I told him, my voice steady. Your grandmother will call to invite me to dinner. She'll say she wants to clear the air. When she does, I will accept. He was quiet, listening. The plan requires precise timing, I continued. I need you to arrive exactly 15 minutes late. By then, the trap will be set. Your father will have already started in on me. His mockery is the trigger. That's your signal. I gave him his instructions for his entrance. Walk in. I don't want you to say hi to anyone else first. Not your mother, not your grandfather. You walk directly to me. It needs to be formal. It needs to be a statement. Then we started running drills. We role-played their every likely reaction. Our mother's immediate attempt to smooth things over. Her inevitable, now is not the time or place. Our father's panicked, guilty silence. And my brother's blustering, cornered rage. For each of their predictable moves, we devised a calm, fact-based response. We rehearsed our lines. We prepared our counter-offensives. The personal pain of it all was gone. It had been replaced by a sharp, tactical focus. and a specific memory of running military drills came back to me. We would simulate worst-case scenarios, ambushes, equipment failure, communication breakdown, over and over and over. We did it until the correct response was no longer a thought. It was automatic. It was muscle memory. I was doing the same thing now, drilling my and David's responses to their emotional attacks until they were just as automatic, until there was no risk of us being pulled back into the chaos. Do you rehearse difficult conversations in your head? What's the most elaborate wargaming you've ever done before talking to someone? We were in the middle of a drill, simulating Mark's denial about the business failing, when David stopped me. He said something that became the final, crucial key to the entire operation. He gave me the tactical advantage. "You know, my dad has a tell," he said. "When he feels exposed, he attacks. He always does. And he only has one move. The moment he feels cornered, he'll mock you about your service. He'll make a joke about it. It's his only weapon," and there it was. The key. The thing that would allow me to control the entire engagement without ever being the aggressor. I didn't need to find a way to start the confrontation. I just needed to create the conditions for him to start it for me. I just had to wait for his one predictable attack. He would be the one to spring my trap. Predictability is a weapon, and they are very predictable. The call came 3 days later, right on schedule. It was my mother. Her voice was bright, artificial. She said it had been too long, that the family needed to be together, that she was making my favorite dinner. She suggested we have a nice family dinner to clear the air. It was the exact phrase David and I had predicted. The ambush was being set. I told her I'd be there. I walked into that house feeling like I was moving through enemy territory, but with a mission plan and total situational awareness. I was calm. I carried a simple tote bag over my shoulder. Inside was the briefing book. The weapon. They were all in their designated positions, just as we'd wargamed. Mark was on the couch, a smug, self-satisfied smirk already on his face. He was ready for round 2. My father was staring intently at the television, which wasn't even on. His time-tested method for avoiding conflict. My mother was fluttering nervously around the kitchen, a whirlwind of anxious energy. The small talk was strained, pathetic. My mother asked about my job. My father asked about my car. Mark just watched me, waiting for his opening. He didn't have to wait long. After a few minutes of agonizing silence, he leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. "So, Sarah," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Dad tells me your little 5-day speech got canceled. Guess they found someone with actual leadership experience." He laughed. It was the same short, sharp, dismissive sound from before, the sound of a bully who thinks he's already won. It was the signal, the trigger for the entire operation. My heart rate was perfectly steady. I could feel my pulse in my neck, slow even. I felt a sense of quiet, absolute power. He was following the script perfectly. That's when a memory of a different kind of pressure surfaced. The memory of standing perfectly still, at attention, during a full dress inspection in basic training. A drill sergeant, his face inches from mine, screaming until he was red in the face. I learned a critical lesson in that moment, a lesson that had nothing to do with shining boots. I learned that real power isn't in reacting. It's in enduring the noise without flinching. It's in letting the other person's rage and insecurity just break against your calm. What's the most predictable insult someone always throws at you? The one you know is coming every single time? How do you react to it? I didn't react at all. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even change my expression. I just waited, letting his ugly words hang in the air, letting the poison do its own work. And the discovery in that moment wasn't the insult itself. It was the dawn confirmation. It was the live, real-time proof that David's intelligence was 100% accurate. The trap was now sprung. He had walked right into it. Cue the defendant. The silence that followed his insult was unbearable. It stretched for 5 seconds, 10, 15. Mark's smirk started to falter. My mother opened her mouth to say something, to smooth it over, no doubt. But before she could, the front door opened, and David walked in. He was wearing his Air Force service dress uniform, the formal blue suit. It was immaculate. The silver ranks on his shoulders seemed to catch every bit of light in the room. He walked with a purpose that made the floorboards creak. He ignored his parents. He ignored his grandfather. He walked directly across the living room to where I was sitting on the couch. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me, his shoes shining. In the dead silent room, he brought his right hand up in a sharp, perfect, textbook salute. The snap of his gloved hand hitting the edge of his brow was like a gunshot. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clear and formal, a voice trained to cut through the noise of a cockpit and a battlefield. "Captain David Sterling reporting as requested. It's an honor to be here with you." The entire room froze. It was as if someone had sucked all the air out. Mark's face went slack, the smirk completely evaporated, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. My father made a gut-wrenching sound as he choked on his water for the second time in as many weeks. My mother just stared, her mouth hanging open, her eyes wide with a confusion so profound it was almost comical. A wave of pure, overwhelming vindication washed through me. It was a feeling so powerful it almost knocked the breath out of me. It was more than an apology. It was better than any shouted argument I could ever have won. It was a public, irrefutable acknowledgement of my rank, my service, and my honor, delivered in the one language of respect my family could not dismiss or devalue. I remembered the very first time I was saluted by a junior airman, right after I'd received my commission. The weight of it, the feeling of earned respect, and the sudden, crushing sense of responsibility that came with it. Seeing that gesture reflected now, in this room, for this specific purpose, was the most validating moment of my entire life. Goosebumps moment, right? If someone could give you a public show of support like this, a moment that just silences all the critics, who would it be and what would they do? Because what happened in that room was more than just a gesture. The salute was a judgment. David, the golden child's son, the family's other military officer, had just publicly and formally chosen his allegiance. In front of everyone, he had judged me worthy of honor. And by extension, he had judged them unworthy. The family's power to define me, to erase me, to belittle me, was broken. In the snap of a salute, it was gone forever. Respect just entered the room. I gave David a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He dropped his salute and stood at ease behind my right shoulder, a silent, uniformed guard. My witness. I then reached into my tote bag. I pulled out the black 3-ring binder and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. It made a solid, heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I'm not here to argue," I said calmly, my voice even and low. "I'm here to present facts." I opened the binder. "Exhibit A," I began, my finger tapping the first plastic sleeve, a documented 20-year timeline of my military service milestones being systematically ignored and erased on all family channels. While Mark's failures were simultaneously reframed as successes, I turned a page. The plastic rustled. Exhibit B, a wire transfer confirmation for $250,000 from Dad's personal investment account to Mark, to start a company that he has claimed for years was self-funded. My mother started to say something. "Sarah, this is inappropriate." But I just continued, my voice overriding hers. Exhibit C, a series of articles from the local business journal detailing Mark's financial mismanagement, significant client loss, and a toxic work environment. I turned another page. Exhibit D, a publicly available lawsuit filed against Mark's company for $75,000 in unpaid invoices. I paused. I looked at Mark. The color was draining from his face, replaced by a pale, sweaty sheen. Exhibit E, I continued. A photograph of a whiteboard in Mark's office, in his own handwriting, outlining a plan to use Mom to pressure Dad for another $100,000. My mother made a small, wounded sound. My father just stared at the binder, his mouth slightly open, as if he was seeing the physical evidence of his own choices for the first time. This was the calmest I had ever been in my life. It was the grim satisfaction of an investigator whose case is so solid, so irrefutable, that the outcome is a foregone conclusion. I was simply reading the charges. It reminded me of giving a final briefing before a critical mission. My voice steady, pointing to maps, to intelligence photos, laying out the objective, unchangeable reality for my team. This was my final briefing for my family. Have you ever laid out all the facts for someone, leaving them with absolutely nowhere to hide? Describe the look on their face when the lies finally ran out. I turned one last page. And finally, Exhibit F. A family-wide email from my mother, sent just last month, celebrating Mark's expansion, while simultaneously asking the family to pray for me while I adjust to civilian life, 3 years after the fact. I let the weight of that final fact settle in the room, and in that silence, I made the ultimate discovery. I watched the layers of their denial just peel away in real time. Mark's blustering rage had evaporated, leaving behind a stunned, humiliated silence. My mother's attempts at gaslighting had faltered and died, faced with her own words in black and white. And my father, he just stared at the binder, at the tangible proof of the conspiracy he had funded. I discovered in that moment that without their lies, without their carefully constructed narrative, they had absolutely nothing to say. The evidence will now speak for itself.